My ex said I was too serious, and that he needed a woman who could have fun. He moved to Miami with a bartender. I stayed home, built a business, and met someone real. A week after I posted our engagement photos, my ex came with a bouquet of flowers and announced. The first thing I wanted to do was slap him. Hard right across that tanned, smug face of his. But I didn't. I stood there, holding the door open just enough to make it clear he wasn't invited inside, and smiled. It was Ethan. Of course it was Ethan. Bouquet of grocery store roses in one hand, sunglasses tucked into the other like he was about to step onto a yacht, not my porch. He didn't look nervous. He looked like he expected applause. Like I should be grateful he remembered where I lived. Or maybe not remembered. My parents probably gave him the address. They never really let him go, even after he dumped me and ran off to Miami with some bartender named Lexi or Lola or whatever. He said, "We need to talk." All I could think was, oh no, you need something. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to slap him. I was going to be smarter. Let me back up. Ethan and I dated for 3 years. The whole time I thought we were building something real. I wanted marriage. He wanted to party. He always had this way of making me feel like I was the boring one. Too serious. Too structured. Like having goals and ambition was some kind of personality defect. When he finally left, he made it sound like a public service. He said he needed someone who knew how to have fun. Apparently, Lexi the bartender was fun enough to convince him to move to Miami within a week. He took half our joint savings and didn't look back. Not even a text. And the worst part? My parents defended him. They said I was being dramatic. That I should give him space, that I'd regret it if I didn't try to fix things. My mom said love is hard. My dad said Ethan was a good investment. I blocked them both that night. Didn't speak to them for almost a year. Instead, I focused on the only thing I had left. The idea I'd been sitting on since college. I turned it into a business. Scrappy at first, just me and a laptop on my couch, but it grew. I learned fast, hired smarter, landed clients I used to dream about. 12 months later, I had my own agency, a 6-person team, and more revenue than I ever thought I'd see on a tax form. And then came Caleb. Quiet, solid, grounded. The opposite of Ethan in every possible way. We met through a mutual friend, started talking, and didn't stop. He wasn't flashy, but he made everything feel safe and real. 6 months and he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. We posted a few photos. Nothing dramatic. Just us happy. For once, it didn't feel like something I needed to prove. It just was. And now Ethan was standing in front of me, asking to talk like the last 2 years hadn't happened. Like he didn't set a fire and run. I stepped aside just slightly, enough to make him think maybe he'd be invited in. I already knew he wouldn't be, but I wanted to see what he'd do next. And trust me, I wasn't disappointed. I didn't ask him to sit, but he wandered in like it was still his place. Like 2 years hadn't passed and he hadn't torched everything on his way out. I stood behind him, arms crossed, waiting for him to say whatever it was that brought him to my door at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. He started slow. Said Miami wasn't what he thought it would be. That Lexi, yes, he actually used her name, turned out to be unstable. He said he'd been thinking about me a lot lately. That he missed our talks, our routines, the way I grounded him. He even said that Caleb looked like a good guy, but maybe a little too simple for someone like me. I wanted to laugh in his face. Instead, I asked what made him come back now. Why, after everything, he thought there was anything here for him. He shrugged, then said something about fate. He'd seen our engagement photos online. Said they were nice. That I looked beautiful. I didn't respond. I just watched the way his eyes kept scanning the room, lingering on things he didn't recognize. The art, the new furniture, the awards on the bookshelf. Then he said it. He knew I'd been successful. Said he'd seen my name in a 30 under 30 article that a friend of his forwarded. I hadn't told anyone publicly, not even my parents. But of course they bragged. They were probably still hoping I'd take him back. That's when he asked if I could help him out. He used those exact words. Help me out. Like I was a charity. Said he needed a small loan. $15,000 to be exact. Claimed he was in some trouble with back rent, old credit cards, and something about a business idea that had almost worked. He knew I had it. He looked me right in the eye and said it like we were still in a relationship and I owed him something. And I saw it so clearly in that moment. This wasn't about missing me. This wasn't about love or regret. It was about access. I was a solution to a problem. So I told him I'd think about it. Watched him light up like he just convinced me to take him back. He asked if I could send him something small right away, just to cover a few immediate things. Gas, maybe a motel. Just enough to get through the weekend. I said sure. Told him I'd Venmo it to him. He left looking pleased with himself. Still carrying the flowers, which I never touched. As soon as the door closed, I opened Venmo and sent him exactly $1. Caption: for the bottled water you should have bought instead of wasting my time. His response came fast. First a question mark. Then, is this a joke? Then a paragraph about how he was humbling himself by coming to me, how disappointed he was, how I used to be a better person. I waited. Then I typed, Come near me again or send another message and I'll post the Halloween photo. You know the one. The heels. The lipstick. That little red dress. He didn't reply right away. But I knew he remembered. Everyone who was at that party remembered. He thought it was hilarious at the time. Well, probably not so much. 2 minutes later I sent him a cropped preview. Just the dress and the heels. Nothing that would ruin his life. Yet. Just enough to send a message. This time he didn't text back. Not even a curse word. Just silence. For about 48 hours. Because 2 days later my doorbell rang again. But it wasn't Ethan. It was my parents. And they didn't come with flowers. When I opened the door and saw them standing there, my mom with her arms full of judgment and my dad already scowling, I didn't even ask what they were doing. I just stepped aside and let them in, mostly because I knew they weren't leaving without a scene, and I wasn't in the mood to have that scene on my front lawn. The moment they were inside, my mother started. No greeting. No how have you been. Just straight into the monologue about Ethan. Apparently he'd gone to see them. Told them some sad little story about how he was trying to make things right, how he came to me in good faith and I humiliated him with that Venmo stunt. My mom looked at me like I was a criminal. She asked if I really sent him $1 with that kind of message. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just smiled. That was enough for her. She said I'd become bitter. That success had changed me. That I used to be sweet and generous and now I was just cold. She said the word like it tasted bad. Like it wasn't the result of everything I'd survived but a personal failure. A character flaw. My dad jumped in. Said maybe I was rushing into marriage with Caleb just to prove something. That Ethan had his faults, sure, but he came from a good family. That I could have had a real life with him. Travel, status, influence. He actually said, you're not just marrying down, Olivia. You're shrinking. That's when I stopped trying to be polite. I asked if they'd always thought this way. If they ever believed in me or if they just saw me as someone to trade off like a business deal. My mother looked genuinely confused, like she couldn't see why I was upset. My dad? He just stood there with that tight, disappointed look like I was some underperforming asset. I told them about everything. The cheating. The money he took. The way he treated me like I was an anchor, not a partner. And still they defended him. Still they said he was trying now. That people make mistakes. That he was a man under pressure. That I needed to show some compassion. And then my mom said the line that broke whatever was left between us. She said, you're being selfish. Not Ethan. Not them. Me. For cutting off a toxic man. For building a life without their approval. For refusing to let someone use me again. I was selfish. I walked to the door and opened it. Neither of them moved. I told them I loved them once, but that I wouldn't allow them to poison what I'd built. I said they could choose to be part of my life as it is, not as they wished it to be. But if they came here again to shame me, to push Ethan back into my life, or to insult Caleb, I'd block their numbers permanently and change the locks. They left without another word. That night, Caleb came home and found me packing. Not everything, just a few boxes. I told him what happened. Every last detail. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just looked him in the eye and said, I want to leave. I want to start over somewhere new. With you. Only you. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded. By the weekend, we were looking at apartments in cities we'd only talked about visiting. Boston. Boulder. Asheville. Cities with color and calm. Places where people smiled at strangers and didn't ask about your resume before your name. And when we finally moved, we didn't tell anyone. No address. No forwarding mail. No photos online. Just a new key, a new chapter, and the quiet, powerful joy of knowing that I had finally fully left it all behind. It was a Sunday afternoon. Rain tapping gently against the windows, jazz humming low from the speakers, and Caleb was making pancakes in the kitchen. The kind of quiet morning that makes you believe you're untouchable. Safe. Then came the knock. Not the doorbell. A knock. Deliberate. I looked at Caleb. He raised an eyebrow. We weren't expecting anyone. We hadn't told anyone where we lived. I opened the door slowly, and there he was, thin, soaked from the rain, hair longer than I'd ever seen it, and standing like he'd been rehearsing this moment in his head for weeks. His eyes flicked past me and landed on Caleb. Caleb, bless his heart, walked up right behind me and asked, you good? Ethan smiled like we were old friends. Like this was a surprise drop-in from someone who still belonged. He didn't even acknowledge Caleb, just looked at me and said, I was passing through. Thought I'd check in. Before I could respond, a voice came from behind Ethan. Oh my God, this is her? This is Olivia? A woman. Blonde. Too much perfume, smeared lipstick, heels not made for rain. She stepped forward and looped her arm through Ethan's. I've heard so much about you, she said, already halfway into the apartment. Ethan didn't stop her. Caleb and I just stood there. She introduced herself as Marcy. She said she and Ethan had reconnected recently and decided to take a little road trip. Said she thought it would be fun to meet the infamous Olivia. Every word out of her mouth was a mixture of smug and venom. She had no filter. No tact. She walked around the apartment like it was a model home, commenting on our furniture, the smell of the place, even the color of our walls. Said she thought Olivia would have gone for something a little more modern. I told her we were in the middle of something and this wasn't a good time. That's when Ethan finally spoke. Said it'd only take a minute. Said he just wanted closure. Closure. He looked right at Caleb and asked man to man, don't you ever wonder if she's really over it? Marcy laughed like it was all a big joke. Said something about how emotional women never really let go. Caleb didn't say anything, just stepped closer to me. His presence alone changed the temperature of the room. I turned to Ethan and told him he needed to leave. No. Marcy wasn't done though. She stepped forward, too close, too smug, and said, maybe she's just mad she didn't get a ring from you first. That's when Caleb moved. Not violently. Not even loudly. Just enough. Enough to step between us, to block her view, and to make it clear this wasn't going to go the way she thought. Marcy got louder. Said I was scared. Said I couldn't handle being around real people. Then she actually said, it's obvious you're still obsessed with Ethan. That's why you keep dragging this out. And for a second, just a second, I thought I might hit her. But I didn't. I turned to Ethan and said, this is who you dragged into my life? He looked embarrassed. But not enough to apologize. Just enough to look away. I pointed to the door and told them both they had 10 seconds before I called the cops. Marcy opened her mouth again, but Caleb raised his hand and said no. Don't. Not to me. To her. That shut her up. They left. No apology. No explanation. Just the wet sound of their footsteps fading down the hallway. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a long time. We weren't as hidden as we thought. Not anymore. I couldn't sleep that night. Not after Marcy's smug face, not after the screenshot Caleb got. Especially not after realizing that Ethan had probably never stopped watching. The sense of safety I'd worked so hard to rebuild cracked wide open. And the worst part was, it felt like someone had been inside our walls the entire time. That shared calendar. Of all the things, I hadn't looked at it in almost 2 years. It was synced to an old account and I'd forgotten it even existed. But Ethan hadn't. He must have checked it. Maybe once. Maybe 100 times. And my parents? I didn't even want to know how often they fed him updates under the guise of concern. I didn't call them. What was there to say? They'd made their choice. I was done trying to explain myself to people who only heard what they wanted. The next morning, Caleb and I sat on the living room floor, the sun streaming in like nothing had happened, and made a list. Not of what we wanted, but of what we needed. We needed out. Not just to leave town. We needed to disappear. While Caleb searched realtors, I started scrubbing. I deleted every online mention of our address I could find. Pulled my business registry from local listings. Told my team we were going remote for the next few months and forwarded all calls to my assistant. We planned everything fast. It wasn't panic. It was precision. Like we were executing a controlled burn. Then came the twist. While I was packing up my home office, I found a plain white envelope wedged between 2 books on the bottom shelf. No name. No stamp. Just folded paper inside. I opened it. There were 3 photos inside. Old ones. Printed. Me asleep on the couch. Caleb cooking in the background. Another of me outside jogging, earbuds and hair up. These weren't screenshots. These were taken with a real camera. And they weren't recent. They were from our first 2 weeks in Asheville. Someone had been watching us long before Ethan showed up. That's when my hands started shaking. Because suddenly this wasn't just about jealousy. It wasn't just some petty ex trying to stir drama. This was control. This was ownership. I turned the photos over. On the back of one in the corner someone had written, "You don't get to vanish, Olivia." That night we didn't sleep. We didn't talk much. Caleb changed all our passwords. I made calls, quiet ones, to a few friends I still trusted. Lawyers. One ex-client who used to work in cyber investigations. I told them as little as I could, just enough to light a fire. By morning one thing was clear. This wasn't about fear anymore. This was war. We drove out of Asheville the next afternoon before sunset, leaving behind everything that could be traced. We didn't go to Savannah. That would have been too easy. Instead we drove north. Small towns. Back roads. Burner phones and prepaid cards. We stayed in places that didn't ask questions. Changed cars in Raleigh. Booked an Airbnb under a fake name in the mountains of West Virginia. Total radio silence. And while we moved I worked. Not just on relocating. On something else. A gift. For Ethan. Because if he thought he could stalk and manipulate me into falling apart, he had severely miscalculated the version of me that came out of all this. I sent one last message before we vanished completely. Just one. From a burner account. Encrypted. No trace. I know what you did. I know when you did it. And if you ever try this again, the world will know who you really are. Game's over. You lost. I attached a video. 32 seconds of him in that ridiculous red dress and heels at the Halloween party, drunkenly pretending to strip to a room full of people filming him. I'd held it for years. Never shared it. but I knew how much he feared it. I didn't release it. Not yet. Just enough to remind him that some ghosts bite back. He never responded. That was the last time I ever heard from him. No. We live in a quiet coastal town that isn't on any list. Caleb works remotely. I run the business through a proxy and only take clients I trust. We don't post. We don't update. We just live. No contact with my parents. No regrets. Some people start over. I vanished. And honestly, it's the happiest I've ever been. 3 months passed. Long enough for the adrenaline to fade, for the shadows under my eyes to soften, for me to believe, if only for a moment, that maybe we truly slipped into a new life. The town we chose wasn't big. It had one grocery store, a single-screen movie theater, and a diner that still used paper menus. People nodded at you in the street without asking questions. That was the point. Caleb settled in like he was born for it. Our apartment was small but bright, and we filled it with things that made us feel anonymous. Nothing branded. Nothing flashy. Just clean slates everywhere we looked. And for a while we were good. Until one Sunday afternoon I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. My name scrawled in my mother's handwriting. I didn't even need to open it to know exactly what it would be. But I did anyway. The letter was 6 pages long. And every single sentence was a reminder that even blood can be a stranger. She wrote that she missed me. That they were worried sick. That I had changed. That she didn't understand why I had abandoned my family. That my father had cried. Then came the guilt. She said Ethan had been confused, wounded, and that I had no right to threaten him, no right to expose his mistakes. She accused me of blackmail. She wrote the word like she was testing how far she could push without saying what she really meant. You embarrassed us. And buried in the middle of it all was this line. You used to be the girl who wanted to make us proud. Now you act like we're your enemy. I didn't finish the letter. I folded it calmly and dropped it into the trash. The next day I got an email. A new account. No name. Just a short message. Family doesn't vanish. You'll come back eventually. You always do. I knew it was my father. He never did understand subtlety. That night I told Caleb everything. I asked him a question I never thought I'd have to ask again. What if they don't stop? He looked at me, then asked a better one. What if we make sure they can't? We met with a lawyer 2 days later. A private firm 2 towns over that specialized in restraining orders, privacy protection, digital trace cleanup. It was expensive. It was quiet. It was worth every penny. And I filed. Not because I was scared. Not anymore. But because I wanted the paper trail. I wanted the world, if it ever came to that, to know that I drew a line. I didn't respond to the letter. Or the email. But I did send one final message through the lawyer. A simple statement. This is your only warning. Contact me again in any form and you will lose access to everything. Permanently.